Teach students strategies that are specific for learning and for task completion. Strategies for students with help students with disabilities with processing information, developing analogies. They can help students cope through the learning process, help evaluate their own learning process, help students organize information, and help students rehearse what has been learned. We will select a few strategies and describe how each may be used for students with mild disabilities. It is important to critique strategies for appropriateness to be used with all students. First strategy we'll look at is COPS, capitalization, overall appearance, punctuation, and spelling. COPS is a simple editing strategy that has been validated with students with mild disabilities across grade levels. Now when you look at COPS, of course students would have to be taught what is appropriate capitalization and punctuation at their grade level. They would also have to be taught what a good paper or a good product should look at. When we look at the last component, spelling, this is the area where most students with disabilities struggle. And so students would have to be taught strategies for spelling. They may be needed to be provided with supports, a dictionary, or a spell checker in order to edit their papers appropriately for the whole strategy. Another simple strategy is RAP. RAP has also been validated for students with mild disabilities. Read the paragraph, ask self to identify the main idea and two supporting details, and put the main idea and details into your own words. For students with significant reading comprehension difficulties, the RAP strategy, however, may be too difficult as is. The teacher in this case may want to teach the student how to identify main ideas first, then teach separately how to identify supporting details, then teach the students how to put it all together. Now it is your turn to critique a strategy. List why you think the following strategy would work well for some students and why the strategy would not work well for other students. PARs for reading: preview, ask questions, read, summarize. Oops. You may have come up with a couple of ideas of why PARs may not be appropriate for all students with mild disabilities. For example, students may need to be taught how to preview, how to ask appropriate questions, and how to summarize. These skills are high-level skills and skills that should be taught, but maybe not in a complete package at first. Next, let's look at adapting instructional settings. Many of these adaptations are easy to do and can make a big difference in student learning. An example is to provide seating in study carrels. For the student in our video with Asperger's, this might be a great accommodation. Provide learning areas. Learning areas provide students with a way to go to an area and practice learned skills or learn skills in a more broken down fashion. Consider group arrangements. Consider organization for instructional delivery. Be flexible in grouping. Be prepared to change your groups when they include students with mild disabilities, and be sure to create a positive learning climate. Learning centers, as I noted, provide opportunities for individualized instructions and are a great resource for a classroom that has students with mild disabilities. Planned physical movement throughout instructional time is absolutely critical for students that have attention difficulties or behavioral disabilities. Of course, that has to be structured in a way that you can have the students return to the task at hand. Proximity control is often one of the most easiest things to do and most effective. Simply standing by a student who has difficulties attending or behaving can control their learning outcome. Next, let's look at adapting student behaviors. To assist in modifying behaviors, consider minimizing resistance by implementing accommodations, enhancements, and adjustments. In other words, be proactive in planning instruction. Next, involve students in developing classroom rules. Identify and minimize triggers. The longer you work with a student with a disability, or actually any student in your classroom, you will be able to identify triggers, and there's no reason to set those off. Establish and follow routines, and use instructionally appropriate and motivating learning activities. Be sure to build relationships with the student both inside and outside of the classroom. Enhance the student's self-esteem, and avoid escalating confrontations. Students with mild disabilities often need individual or group social skills training. These students often need individual and specific self-management training. Finally, provide these students with clear and concise expectations, contingency contracting, individualized instruction. Planned ignoring is wonderful, works real well with students with mild disabilities. Planned physical movement, prompting, providing choices, proximity control, role playing, signal interference, student accountability, timeout, and touch control. You'll note that some of these I repeated, and some of them deserve repeating. Proximity control, for example, is an easy solution for many students. Briefly, let's look at English language learners with mild disabilities. There are special considerations for these students. When working with these students, it's important to consider their family structure, their gender role in interpersonal relationships. Students from different cultures, their families may view disability in a different way than we do in our country, in the United States, and so that needs to be considered. Consider their procedures for discipline. For example, I noted timeout before. This may not be acceptable in a different country or from a different culture. Be sure to consider the culture's view towards time, space, religion, and health, and respect their traditions, holidays, and significant historical events. Let's review. Remember that these questions are similar to those that will be on your exam. Number 1, for students with EBD, adapting instruction is always more critical than adapting student behavior, true or false? The answer is false. Whether you're addressing external acting out behaviors or internalizing withdrawn behaviors, the key for these students often is to address the behavioral needs. A major component of effective instruction for students with disabilities is slow pacing, modeling, reduction of instructional objectives, homogeneous grouping, none of the above. The answer is modeling. Students do not always need to have slow pacing or a reduction of instructional objectives. And as much as possible, students with disabilities should be placed in heterogeneous groups. Modeling, however, is the most powerful instructional component for these students with disabilities. Strategies can help students develop quick learning tricks, good friendships, improved memory, analogies, none of the above. The answer is analogies. Strategy applies structures for learning tasks that can be used and transferred to other tasks. For example, you taught a strategy for looking for keywords in math problem solving. This can be analogous to keywords in science. All strategies can be modified to meet the needs of all students with mild disabilities. True or false? The answer is false. Sometimes a strategy may be reduced to one part, but that's not the complete strategy. Sometimes a strategy is not appropriate at all for some students. Student behavior can be adapted by criticizing the student in private, proximity control, using peers to set rules, releasing the student from required classwork, none of the above. The answer is proximity control. It is often the most powerful approach. Simply standing by a student can often change behavior and improve attention. And I note that one because it was my favorite that I used in my many years as a classroom teacher. Cultural factors have little impact on providing instruction to English language learners with mild disabilities. True or false? The answer is false. Cultural factors are critical and need to be considered when planning instruction for these students. Promoting academic and social participation for students with mild disabilities requires teacher thoughtfulness and implementation. These students do not always develop friendships on their own. To facilitate participation in the classroom, use peer-based strategy, facilitate friendships, and use technology. Some examples of peer-based strategies are peer support communities, cooperative learning, peer mentoring, encouraging participation outside the classroom, and family involvement. Peer support communities are communities of students, a wide range of students, and let's look at the note at the bottom that it is important that the committee membership is rotated, that all students have an opportunity to participate. The committee should not be based on ability, academic ability, or social or behavioral ability. In these committees, a class problem is identified, a strategy is created to address the problem, and the committee brainstorms ways to promote friendship and active academic and social participation of all class members. Next is cooperative learning.